Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Tuesday, July 17th, 2018. Joining us on the line to talk about Audi Fields, the DC United, Wayne Rooney, Charles Boehm. Charles, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Charles. I have two sort of similar questions, really bang off the top, that are really important. The first one is, did you ever think you'd live to see the day? And the second one is, did the raccoons make the trip?
Number one, I really wasn't sure. I always thought it would happen eventually, but I didn't know where. For a while, it looked like maybe the stadium would happen in Baltimore, and they would become Baltimore United. For a while, there was a site in suburban Maryland. There was sites in Virginia discussed, and of course, if they had had any further delays in this whole process, we might be talking about Austin United or Sacramento United. So I figured they'd find a home somewhere. The question was where, and to wind up on the DC waterfront in a revitalizing waterfront neighborhood that's, I think, in the long term going to work out to be an extremely good location. This was unexpected. And then on the second one, it did not spot any raccoons. They're almost as close to the water as RFK was. So maybe in the years to come, some of the local wildlife will get more comfortable enough when the construction site is all cleaned up. Maybe we'll get some raccoons. But for now, the closest thing is the most of the stadium seats are raccoon gray. That was their little nod to the RFK history. So there is a little bit of raccoon tribute there.
Charles, I'm notoriously anti-mascot, like irrationally so, but in this one case, I would accept a raccoon mascot for DC United moving forward as well. All right, more seriously put, though, I always remember the first moment I walked into BMO Field. Well, what my feelings, emotions, memories of that are. It was, in my case, the stomping of the feet, how loud it was underneath the stand. What was your initial first reaction when you walked into that stadium after all those years of imagining it?
Great question. I would say it's probably the vistas, the steepness of the stands. One thing they definitely got right, and there are some issues, and unfortunately the opening day of the stadium has not been the sort of universally sunny, positive, happy occasion for a number of reasons that maybe we'll get into in a bit here. But my impression of the stadium, the angles, the intimacy of it, it's really striking. I mean, it feels like maybe even an even tighter version of a place like Children's Mercy Park in KC. Definitely tighter than places like PPL Park or Talon Energy Stadium or StubHub Center. I'm getting all my various sponsor names mixed up. It's very steep. The angles of the stadium are equal to the steepest around the league. Even the nosebleed seats are great seats, as several players observed to me after the game. And the vistas, you are plopped down right in the middle of the city. You can see the Washington Monument off in the distance. In one direction to the north, you can see the U.S. Capitol, which they've incorporated into the stadium design with kind of a little bit of a keyhole there. There's a rooftop bar that you can get views of both the stadium and the field and the Capitol and the DC skyline. And then you can even see the planes that are dropping in on final approach to Reagan National Airport across the river. So really a pretty location. And I'd like to think that even if there's been some mistakes made in terms of management and leadership around the club, in the long run, that's what counts. And so some of those other shortcomings can be fixed, but you cannot replace, you cannot match a location like this.
You mentioned issues, and one on game day that was actually surprising, and we were concerned, is the piece of metal that fell on Lindsay Simpson's head. Is she okay?
I have to be honest. I don't want to speak out of turn here. I'll just say that we're told she's okay, but I've not heard from her myself. And I've heard some rumors that the club may be sort of soft pedaling this a little bit and maybe understating the extent of her injury. I don't think she's in serious harm, anything life threatening along those lines, but it was a substantial injury, and it's not for nothing that she was unable to continue with her night's work. And we have to remind. I want to tell the wider audience here, this is not just a sideline reporter. Lindsay Simpson is really an enormous element of this club. She wears multiple hats. She's the head of their communication department. She's also heads the marketing department. So this is a really dedicated servant of the club, and I'm certainly hoping she's okay.
I just wanted to point it out because when there's a new stadium opening, often it's not always ready, right? I've remembered seeing people paint just the day before, the morning of, final rivets here and there, and I just hope that for the safety of everyone involved, that it was an isolated incident.
Yeah, and I just recently learned today, listening to Sebastian Salazar, ESPN reporter and DC native and former DC United employee, on the Max and Hurt podcast. Apparently, that was one of those railings. It was kind of like almost like a cap, a crown for the railings. That was the piece that fell off, and apparently that was one of the last things they worked on the stadium.
Yeah. Charles is in the ether. He should be back any second now. But it is a bit of a concerning aspect. But now, the other concerning aspect, Charles, in this thing here is DC United last in the Eastern Conference, but Wayne Rooney, is he the savior? We'll try to get Charles back as soon as... Charles, you there? Okay, there you are. There's Charles. Sorry about that, Charles. We missed you for a bit. I think you were stuck in the ether for a second, maybe in even the quantum.
Oh no! Okay.
Yeah, you were in the quantum verse, maybe even. But is DC United and Wayne Rooney, is he the savior?
I hate that word. I think it's puts everybody involved in a tough spot. But I know why you're using it. I think it's valid in the sense that this is a guy who has had a lot of expectation piled on him, both on and off the field. He is really, in some ways, it's a throwback signing to the old days of DPs with David Beckham and Juan Pablo Angel and those kind of guys who are expected to carry a lot of weight, not just on the field, but in the community, in the market, and at the box office. So, this club had faded from relevance. This was a flagship team in this league that won trophies, that racked up as many trophies as anyone in MLS. But they've slashed their budget. They've been stuck in a decaying facility, and so they are simply not as relevant as they once were in a very competitive sports market here in Washington. And Rooney has been brought in to address that part just as much as to score goals and improve the team. So I would say he's definitely got a lot expected of him. But so far the returns are good. He's done a really good job with the press. He's saying the right things. He seems to have the right demeanor, the right personality, very humble guy. And so far, I mean, they played their best soccer of the year in the 32 minutes or thereabouts that he was on the pitch on Saturday. Even his match fitness not being there, his soccer IQ was immediately evident. And they tore the Whitecaps apart down the stretch in that match.
Charles, I had either the fortune or misfortune, depending on your perspective, of covering Jermaine Defoe. And I saw firsthand how uncomfortable he was with that attention that he got. He just could never wrap his head around the fact that reporters were in the dressing room, that he had to make himself available, never embraced that side of his bloody big deal. Wayne Rooney's obviously going to have that kind of pressure put on him in spades. You touched on it, but can you expand on what you're seeing from him that makes you think that he's going to embrace the sales aspect of the DP job?
Yeah, he's not going to be the guy that gives, crazy, compelling media quotes. He's clearly, even given his worldwide stardom, he's not that comfortable in the spotlight, but he's used to the spotlight, right? So he's not an egotistical character. At least he certainly doesn't present himself that way. That's not the vibe you get. but he's such a professional. He knows his kind of where he fits into the puzzle here in DC. I think he's really eager to make this work. I think that the circumstances of his departure from Everton are going to end up helping DC because he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder. That's going to show up more so in how he plays than how he talks or how he acts. He really wants to make this work. I think he wants to show that he's not washed up. I think it's interesting too. Originally, reports suggested that his wife and kids were going to stay in England because his oldest son, I believe, has a budding academy career over there. But they're going to all move over. They're going to settle. I don't know yet where they're going to wind up. It's possible they'll be in the city. I would expect them to wind up kind of out in the suburbs where there's we have the McMansion communities and that sort of thing. But I think he's ready to be the guy here. And he's been the guy at some pretty big places in the past. We're talking about the leading scorer in the history of both the English national team and Manchester United. And I think even if the goals aren't gaudy numbers, again, he played a kind of a false nine role on Saturday, and it was really impressive how it brought out the best in the players around him.
Well, yeah, let's keep going on that. I mean, I think amongst MLS fans, there's a defensive reaction whenever an older star, big-name player comes over. We're not a defensive league or a retirement league anymore. This isn't us. He's going to fail. And I always thought that the reaction when it came to Rooney was a little over the top. This is a guy that scored boatloads of goals in the Premier League, which, let's face it, is a much higher standard than Major League Soccer. So what did you see out there, and what do you think he is going to provide on the pitch directly for DC United this year?
Yeah, so he's been brought in. He's been given the number 9 shirt, and Olsen's been clear that he sees him as a front runner, as a forward. It's not a perfect fit, perhaps, in the sense that they've had a 4-1-4-1 formation with Darren Maddox at the spearhead of it to sort of stretch defenses, occupy center backs, that sort of thing. I think he's going to bring a little bit more nuanced skill set to things. And I think we may see him drop deep. It's possible we'll see different looks. Ben Olsen has already talked about that. They could play 2 guys up top. He could run off of Maddox. He could drift into more of a kind of in the hole role, or maybe even something more of a central midfield role. But he's been brought in to be the guy up front. I think they want to keep him ideally in most conditions around the goal. Again, as we saw the other night, there's plenty of talent around him. Lucho Acosta, the number 10 for DC, is a very talented player who came out of the Boca Juniors. Was a not insubstantial buy by DC United standards 2016. Extremely creative, dynamic, fun player to watch on the ball. We have some wingers in Zoltan Stieber and Paul Arriola and others. They have other options there too, who can get forward, who can cut in, who can threaten on goal, as well as get wide and get to the touchline. Or get to the end line. Excuse me. So you have a couple of different looks here, and I think as long as Olsen, who's been known for his conservatism, but I think he has more options than he's ever had before. As long as he's comfortable with the protection for the back line, the kind of a sturdy central midfield behind those attacking players, I think he's gonna open up the throttle a bit. But I should also say this is a club that still needs help in the back. They're thin at the full back spots. They've said they're going to go out and try and address that in the transfer window. And I think there's definitely questions that can be asked about the central defense. But again, I think one of the fun aspects of this move is that it allows Olsen to be a little bit more aggressive and focus on aesthetically enjoyable soccer.
You mentioned that the shopping is not over, and seen in Montreal in the Montreal-Colorado game about a week and a half ago, DC United scouts on the press box, 2 seats next to me. Defenders, Victor Cabrera's not playing a lot for Montreal. Colorado maybe as well. What is on the shopping list? You mentioned defenders, central, maybe fullbacks. Is it expected to have another transfer done in the next few days? So, Charles
seems to be gone.
Yep. All right. So, thank you very much, Charles.
Hold on, guys. Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. There you go.
All right. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, so I don't claim to be in the know on the latest up to the moment permutations in United's transfer dealings, but I think they're probably looking not at Rooney's stature, but they definitely have the money to spend on some transfer fees and on some substantial salary guys. My guess is they probably have some TAM money and other sort of league funds, and I'm sure they'll be scouring the domestic market in terms of trade. We already saw them trade away Patrick Mullins, a talented but lately underperforming number 9 to Columbus to pick up some allocation money. We may see more deals like that. They've had injuries kind of rack their defense over the course of 2018. So I think we'll see some moves. And again, fullback has been the stated priority. But my guess is they're working the phones.
Charles Boehm of U.S. Soccer Players, MLSsoccer.com, many other places, one of the best in the business. Thank you very much for your time this morning. And I had a thought for you, as many of us did, following you for years on social media. When it opened, finally, I was thinking about you.
That's very kind. I certainly don't deserve the lion's share of the attention or the good vibes, but as someone who's been around this team and covering this team and this local soccer market since 2004, it was definitely a satisfying moment, warts and all, to have a soccer stadium here in the district.
Charles Boehm, you can follow him on social media at @cboehm. Thank you very much, Charles, and we'll be right back after this very short break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
SportsInspired.ca, the official store of the Sports Podcast Network. Get your beautiful cycling shirt like I'm wearing right now if you're a cycling fan, and of course, soccer-inspired jersey. Call it soccer, call it football, call it whatever you like, but buy a shirt. We're back with Duane Rollins. Duane, just to finish on the interview here, to wrap it up, how impressed were you that finally, after years and years, I think we've been through like 4 iterations of a DC stadium, finally a stadium has opened in DC?
Well, I mean, I didn't think I'd see the day. There was a lot of time when I thought that DC United was going to be the '96 team that was in danger of moving, and you know, like Columbus, I didn't want to see that happen. Fortunately, they got it figured out there, and it is, you know, the unfortunate incident aside, it was nice to see the stadium open. And look, it's a market that, based on, it's a great sports market. It's a market that those that know me know that I follow on sports pretty closely because of my weird hockey affiliation, and I did very well to get through that entire interview without bringing that up, so I just broke it there then. At any rate, but it is an underperforming MLS market, and I remember during the Stanley Cup final, I was reading a lot of Washington media, and that's when the Rooney thing came through. It was quite bluntly put that DC United was a non-factor in that market nowadays. So the stadium and. Sorry, Kevin?
No, go ahead. I didn't say anything. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you broke up a little bit there. I apologize for that. So, yeah, between Rooney and the stadium, this is going to provide this club with the opportunity to get back to where it was. When TFC came into the league in 2007, DC United and the Galaxy were the 2 teams I was excited to see because they were MLS to me. And now DC is not. So this is good that they have this opportunity.
We'll keep it short for today, but the unfortunate event that we've talked to Charles off the top is the railing that allegedly fell on top of Lindsay Simpson's head. It's something we never want to happen. Sometimes in the opening of a stadium, you got a set date and you need to get things done last minute, and this being maybe one of the last things they worked on could show a bit of a rush to get that first game there. But it's never a good look, unfortunately, even though the game itself went okay. That aspect of it is a big bummer on day one.
Oh, obviously, yeah. And yeah, I think it would be benefit leagues to force teams to finish their construction for the start of seasons, to not allow them to switch stadiums in the middle of the season. It's one of the things I don't like about MLS is that they've allowed this multiple times now, not just even in Montreal is a prime example. They allowed them to play in the Big O and then move back to Saputo. To me, with all due respect to Montreal, and I understand why they do it, but to me, they shouldn't be allowed to do it. To me, you should have to play an entire season in the same stadium. I think that there's competitive advantages and disadvantages to allowing stadium switches like that. But I guess when you don't completely control everything, that it is hard for MLS to get their way that way. But in this particular case, to get it back to what you're talking about, if you told DC United you either start in March 2018 or March 2019, nowhere in between, they go, okay, we're not going to be ready for March 2018. They're going to make sure it's damn perfectly ready for the 19 launch, right? I think that's a better way to do it. But alas, hopefully she's okay. It's going to sound kind of crass to say it this way, but thankfully at least it was a staff member and not a crowd member, because somehow that seems worse to me. And certainly from a PR perspective, at least it was the PR director. So if she's not going to spin it if she doesn't have to, right? So there you go. It's unfortunate, but the important thing here is that it does provide them with the opportunity to move forward, and I'm sure that they're taking good care of her, and we wish her the best.
And you're pretty damn well sure that they're looking at everything in the stadium to make sure that this never happens again. This happened in my city before as well. Full disclosure, the Olympic Stadium at the end of the 90s weren't that solid, and some pieces of concrete fell a few times and injured some workers as well. And this made for a big inquiry of the entire stadium to make sure it was secure and to make sure parts of the stadium could not fall. Even in Montreal back then, nets were installed just in case. And in this instance, you can pretty well bet on it that as of right now, they're looking at pretty much every rivets, every bolts, everything that they could to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Well, as they should. So good for them, though. And I think, when you talk to end it maybe with Rooney, I thought that it was an impressive debut. And as I said multiple times when we were evaluating the Wayne Rooney move, it wasn't a question of whether the technical skill was there to me. It was whether the fitness was there. And so far, so good. It's going to be a lot of longer, hotter, long flights ahead for him before we know whether this is going to be something that works long-term. But at least at an initial first look, I think he proved that he is going to make this team better. And I don't know why there should have ever been a debate about that.
Well,
again, most overrated and underrated league at the same time. That's why there was a debate.
You've seen Rooney play for a long, long time, right? And we've seen Rooney in images, pictures for the last 20 years, to be quite honest. When he first went to D.C. a few weeks ago, it was delayed a bit, right? It took a little longer. We all knew it was going to happen, but it took like a month to get things finalized, and he looked in shape. He looked in better shape than we last saw him at Everton. So that month of delaying wouldn't be surprised for me if he's like, okay, it's going to be a bit more difficult physically. Well, I'm going to get ready. Have you look at his jawline? Not saying that it's fine, you can wait whatever you want, but as a professional athlete, it shows a bit of you're serious going into a new project. And Wayne Rooney is as fit as I've ever seen him in the last 20 years.
Well, and this also was the first time that he's had an extended period of time off. Because he was an England international for years, and because he was on clubs that would do those, barnstorming tours. He'd about a month off every year, right? Time off matters to these players. Matters to fine athletes. Not to make everything TFC centric, but 24 of the last 28 months they've been playing intense football. That's why they're struggling to find freshness, crispness, right? And it's the same with individual players. So it matters. Like, it's not an excuse. People always do this, it's an excuse, you're tired. No, it's an actual logical reason why people can be tired and why their performances can dip. And I think that Wayne Rooney having an extended period of time off to allow him to get that fitness underpinning is something that he might see benefit from. Now, whether his body can maintain it for the rest of this year and certainly through a full MLS season next year is a full other question. Although I think at this point, DC United, they're even further behind than Toronto. So the fact he'll probably get another 4 months off coming soon is what I'm saying.
Yeah. But it's for 2019, and we'll see. I'm expecting DC to be a big player in the transfer market. That has been quite quiet for the last week, but maybe in the next few weeks we have more details on what pieces DC is going after. Thanks again to Charles Boehm for his time on today's show. You can follow Charles on social media at cboehm, and you can read his work, ussoccerplayers.com, mlssoccer.com, and a lot of other places. Charles Boehm, one of the best in the business and always gracious with his time. We appreciate you, Charles. And as well, we appreciate you, Duane. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We'll be back tomorrow with a show about LAFC and talking about the expansion team of this year. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.